This country is facing great gun violence. There's been a surge in gun sales during the COVID-19 crisis, which has led to more lives being needlessly lost. According to the Gun Violence Archive, an independent research organization, there were 60 mass shootings in May alone. These shootings killed 40 people. They hurt 250 more. Also, there's been a troubling spike in gun sales. Americans bought approximately 2 million guns this past March. It's the second highest month ever for gun sales. That figure does not take into account all the gun sales that could not be completed because the purchaser failed a background check, a number that has also skyrocketed. For example, this past March, the FBI's background check system blocked 23,692 sales, more than double the 9,500 sales blocked in March of 2019. Do you agree that federal, state, and local governments have a compelling interest in preventing a rise in gun violence, particularly during a pandemic?
Well, Senator, of course, the constitutionality of any particular measure that was passed by state or local governments or by this body would be subject to the same judicial process that I described with Senator Graham. What I will say, because this is just descriptive of Heller leaves room for gun regulations. And that's why there has been a lot of litigation in the lower courts, which makes me constrained not to comment on the limits of it. But Heller does not make a right absolute, says so in the opinion.
Well, let me ask one more question. In a recent dissenting opinion that you wrote, you said there was, quote, no question, end quote, that, quote, keeping guns out of the hands of those who are likely to misuse them, quote, is, quote, a very strong governmental interest. Do you stand by that statement?
So, let's see. I can't remember precisely the words of Cantor, which is the case in which I dissented.
That's correct, Cantor v. Barr.
Cantor v. Barr. What I said in that opinion, I stand by, which is that the original meaning of the Second Amendment, and I went through a lot of detailed history in that case, does support the idea that governments are free to keep guns out of the hands of the dangerous. So, for example, the mentally ill, others who would be likely to misuse guns.
So where does that leave you on Roe? The chairman asked, I thought, a very good question. For many people, and particularly for women, this is a fundamental question. We all have our moral values. We have our religions. We live by that. I respect you and your family for doing just that. But this is a very real problem out there. And if you could be more specific in any way with respect how you would view your place on the court with respect to controlling weapons in this country.
I think what I can say is that my opinion in Cantor shows how I approach questions as a matter of judicial philosophy. I mean, I spent a lot of time in that opinion looking at the history of the Second Amendment and looking at the Supreme Court's cases. And so the way in which I would approach the review of gun regulation is in that same way, to look very carefully at the text, to look carefully at what the original meaning was. That was the method that both the majority and dissent in Heller took. So I promised that I would come to that with an open mind, applying the law as I could best determine it.
Okay, let me move on.